Hey guys, welcome. Glad you could join for today's yin class. I often ask students what they want at the beginning of class or what people are needing or craving that day. And I would say probably at least 90% of the time, someone says hips. So think of this as a by request yin for your hips class. It'll be nice to have some support if you don't have regular yoga props at home. Just grab a couple pillows, a blanket. Those will be really helpful to have for some of our postures for class today. And we're just going to start seated. So if you want to sit up on a blanket or even a throw pillow is great for that, then do that. And since we have a little shorter time, we're going to dive right in. Bring the soles of your feet together, knees out wide and butterfly. So I have a fair amount of range of motion in my hips. Not everybody does, right? So sometimes for some of us, this position looks and feels a little more like this. Right? A great support there is a couple of blocks or maybe even a couple throw pillows just snuggled up underneath your knees or your thighs right there. And if it feels like you don't need that, then ditch that. Okay, and then a couple options from here. If you're here and the knees are pretty high, you might just want to stay upright. This might feel like plenty of hip opening and hang out there. Or you can build some support with blocks, with pillows. If you have a couple blocks and a pillow or a bolster, you can do this bench, which is really nice for support. But just ease in. Find the amount of forward fold that works for you and start to settle in. Right, so you might ask, how do I know what's the right amount of forward fold for me? Listen to the sensation that comes up in your body. And so just a reminder that in yin, we're looking for where that edge of sensation is. Right, you can feel it. It feels effective, but not painful. And the quality of that sensation might feel different, right, pose to pose, just depending on the tissue that we're getting into. And so just listen to your body, trust that place. Right? And then I'll also always invite you to listen to your breath. That can be a really good guide for where your edge is. So in these first few moments here, just let yourself find a steady rhythm. It doesn't have to be anything special or fancy. Just bring your attention to your breath. And begin to find a place that feels even with your inhale and your exhale. It could be a nice way just to start to find a little balance of energy. The trick is it also gives our mind something to do as we begin to settle in. I'm going to see if you can take your breath a little bit fuller. And if you're finding it hard to take full, steady breath, that might be a good indicator that you're past that edge of sensation. You just need a little more support or back out a little bit from the pose. And then from there, with each exhale breath, let your body settle in just a little bit heavier. And so we're starting to release the effort, the doing, the engagement, and just begin to settle into stillness, a little more softness, and letting yourself be supported by your props, by the ground, and getting past that effort of the muscles into that place of the fascia, the connective tissue, those sheets that bind and wind everything together. And just take a few more breaths here. Steady, full without forced. And letting the body soften in those last few moments. And just move slowly, as you do in the transitions. Begin to help yourself back up. And set your support off to the side. You can help your knees back together. And then roll forward, come to downward facing dog. And from down dog, just take a nice slow pedal of your legs. It can be gentle, just can be nice to find a little bit of movement in between poses. And we'll start with left side first. So step your left foot forward, bring your right knee down to your mat. And we'll be on knees for a little bit here. So if you want a little extra support, padding, you can grab a blanket, even a pillow underneath your right knee. And then take your left foot out a little bit wider, bring both hands inside your foot for dragon pose. Okay, support here. You can stay up on palms. This might feel like the right amount of sensation. Right amount is always relative. You can come up onto blocks. Sometimes a little extra support and ease that just a little bit. Or if it feels like you have a little bit more space to go, come down onto forearms. Right, on blocks, on your mat, or even on a pillow, that might be helpful. The other little adjustment you can make here is to pick up your right knee, slide it back just a little bit. That might bring in a little bit more sensation, so do what works best. Right, back toes tucked under, flat, whatever feels better. And then if it feels okay for your neck, just let your chin move towards your chest and release the weight of your head a little bit. And then come back to that steady rhythm of your breath. And let that help you determine if we're at the right amount of sensation. And this one, for many people, brings up a fair amount of sensation. So if you're in that camp, you're not alone. Right, this area in the front of the hip flexors can be a little bit finicky. So just be mindful of where it's at. And if at any point it becomes too much, let yourself back out. Give yourself space. While our goal is to stay and hang out in the stillness, that doesn't mean the pain. Back away from that if it shifts into that place at any point. And then to whatever degree feels right, just allow the hips to settle into gravity. I know I find in my body that when the sensation's a little bit stronger, right, the tendency can be to resist that, to resist the letting go. And so that the muscles are still trying to work to protect. And so again, that fine balance between right amount of sensation, but also right amount of surrender. And sometimes that means a little bit more support or different props. We spend a little time in the pose, so I always encourage in yin to spend as much time getting yourself set up in the right place so that you can stay, so you can be there for a little bit. And as you start to let go in your body and connect to your breath, just take a moment, notice what's going on with mind, with thoughts. Sometimes as our bodies get quiet, our minds follow easily. And sometimes they resist that when there's no task, there's no thing to do. So just notice. Thinking, quiet, worrying, without judgment. Just become aware of what mind is doing. And just take a few more breaths for this side. Move slowly when you're ready. Help yourself back up. Shift your hips back, straighten your front leg, and just nice and slow, wiggle your hips a little bit side to side. And come forward, bend your front knee, plant your hands. You can slide your support forward for just a second, then step back, down dog. And then switch sides. So right leg forward, left knee down to your mat or to some support. And then you can start up here on flat palms. This side might be really different with what you need for support for props, so just ease in. You can try up on blocks if you want a little bit more height. Or again, come down onto your forearms on blocks to your mat or to pillow. Go slowly. Check in with sensation. I know in my body, side to side, so different. This side usually needs a little bit more support than the other. If it feels okay, release the weight of your head. Just let your chin settle towards your chest. As long as that doesn't feel like it's straining on your neck. And find that steady rhythm to breath. And the same thing, just let the weight of your body surrender to gravity. Let the hips settle. Sometimes we just notice there are some places that feel like they resist a little bit more than others. And then just come back to that awareness of what's happening with thoughts. And I invite you as we practice, even in this shorter practice, to pay attention to what comes up. So this can be a little bit of a tricky balance in practice, where we want to notice what comes up without getting attached to it. And so when we have this space and time in our yin practice, and we're sometimes getting into these deeper spots of the tissues, it's a great time to listen to what our body's telling us. But to hold these two things to be both independent and true at the same time, that we don't go down a rabbit hole of the wondering of why, or trying to solve it or fix it in this moment. I like to think about it sometimes as just observing what comes up and then let it pass through. We know that experiences, emotions can reside within the tissues and especially within certain parts of the body. And as we open up the space in the tissues and let things move, it's often a time to move that energy through to allow for some release. And this is sometimes especially true in these bigger muscles of the hips and the glutes and stuff that likes to hang on and work so hard. So I invite you into that witnessing place of just noticing. And then take just a few more breaths on this side. And just move slowly, ease your way out. Slide your hips back, straighten your front leg. And then just let your hips sway a little bit side to side. And this allows the front of the hip flexors on the left side to just soften back a little bit. And then step back, come all the way back again, down dog. If you have that blanket, you can set it off to the side. And then we'll start left side again. So this time we're going to set up for swan pose. You bring your left knee behind your left wrist, and then bring your hips down. Right. Figure four on your back, always a great variation if this doesn't feel like the right fit for hips or knees or anything really. You can use a few different variations for support here. You can slide a blanket or a block underneath your left hip. One of my favorite ones here, if you have a bolster, even a pillow works for this, is you can slide that all the way up underneath the pelvis for a really nice amount of support. And then whenever you're ready, walk yourself forward, your upper body forward. You can make a pillow with your hands. You can rest your forehead to a block or to another blanket. And just give yourself time to settle in and to find whatever support helps you to let go fully. And then come back to breath. And so that we reconnect to this in each pose. That simple, steady rhythm. It's just a great way to draw your attention back inside every time we shift shapes. And let the weight of your body go. And just think about that like settling down to gravity instead of resisting it. Release the effort. And even within the sensation, can you find a bit of ease? And just allow yourself to notice sensation that comes up, but maybe also thoughts that come up. Our yoga practice in general is a great time to allow the body to shift through these things, right? Through movement, through release of energy, to help start to unwind the things that have been stored within the tissues. And if this sounds like a funky concept, because it might if it's new, often just relate it to thinking about where you feel stress in your body. For most of us, we have one place where stress likes to live or go. So we think about stress as an emotion. Like the next step would be, what other emotions and or experiences then do we just hold in our body? As we move and release tissue, right, what feels stuck within the tissue, we can help to let that go as well. And thoughts start to drift away, right, from just what's happening in breath or body. Let's gently invite it back. They do that sometimes. Let's notice that and come back. And then just take a few more breaths on this side. And slowly start to ease your way back out. You can stretch back to down dog if that feels good, right? Or if tabletop feels better. Whatever feels like it works for your body in between sides. And take a little pedal of your legs or make some circles with your knee and your hip. And then move to the second side when you're ready. So right knee behind right wrist. See what you need for support on this side. And I just left my bolster there, just knowing that I like that support. But you might need a little bit more, a little bit less, just depending on sensation in this side. And then walk yourself forward. And support your head a little bit more if that feels good with some cushion, or just stack one hand on top of the other and use that like a pillow. And come back to breath. It can be a really nice, helpful touch point at the beginning of each pose. Sometimes we lose that connection in the transition. So just let that be your anchor to come back to. Check in with the amount of sensation on this side. And then in the places that you can or need it, soften the weight of your body just a little more. And just let yourself tune into the places where the sensation is strongest. And often where the physical body is stuck or sticky or tight is where we're also holding on to, like, those emotions, experiences in the body. If they're holding on tight, trying to protect it. And so if you bring a little breath there, does it help to soften? And by bringing the breath there, think about that just as using that a little bit of visualization, imagination, and just awareness to that area of your body. And just notice what happens when you meet that sensation with breath. And then just take a few more breaths for this side. And start to ease your way back out. And same thing, you can come back to tabletop if that feels good. Down dog. A little bit of gentle movement feels good in between sides, pedal of leg, or make some big circles with knee and hip. See what feels right. Just keep it gentle in between and those longer holds. And then when you're ready, bring your knees down to your mat. You can sit back on your heels. We're going to set up for frog pose here. So I'm going to use a blanket and bolster. If you have a blanket and a couple pillows, or if you're on a softer surface like carpet, you may not need the blanket. This is just a nice protection for knees, like if you're on hardwood like this. If you want a little bit more support, blocks are nice too. If you have a couple pillows, you can stack that up. Sometimes one bolster down is plenty. If you want a little bit more support, you're always welcome to build something a little bit more like this. And so you might know a little bit more once we get into the shape and see how it feels. Okay, so from here, take your knees out wide, or as wide as it feels right for you, and then turn your toes out towards the side wall. Right, so the difference here, unlike child's pose, right, child's pose, hips come back. Frog pose, we're going to keep the hips more in line with the knees, just depending on range of motion. Right, you can keep heels a little bit closer together if that eases the sensation a little bit. And then you're going to start to lower down to rest your belly on your support. Right, and you might start to adjust a little bit here. Right, so feet a little wider or closer together. Hips a little bit further forward towards your bolster or back towards your heels. That also might adjust, yep, a little more sensation there. You can turn your head to one side or the other. If it feels like this is too much sensation, back out. Give yourself some more support. You can make adjustments like bringing your heels closer together. I think like dragon pose, this one brings up a fair amount of sensation for many of us. So again, you're not alone. But just be mindful of where that edge is. And then once you're all set up, soften your eyes or close your eyes. And come back to that slow, steady rhythm of breath. Allow the weight of your hips to settle forward towards your bolster, towards your support. Allow your legs to get heavy. And even to soften through face, through jaw, the places that we sometimes hold on without even realizing. Notice where thoughts are. This is a position that we don't always take our hips in through our day-to-day movement. So a great opportunity to release things that might be stuck, feeling stagnant. And like we did before, can you just bring breath to those areas where the sensation's a little stronger, where things are feeling maybe a little sticky? And as you keep your attention to that area, we just notice what comes up without judgment, without attachment. And just observe that. Not that we don't want to know what's going on, right? That's not the witness perspective, but just not to come back to our story around it. Just to allow it to move through. And then just take a few more breaths here. And when you're ready, move slowly. You can slide further forward to your belly or just straighten one leg at a time behind you. And come all the way back to child's pose with your knees together. Just take a few breaths here. Let your hips settle back to your heels. Sometimes even just noticing the sensation that comes up after the pose is just as powerful. Walk yourself back up. If you're on that blanket or support, you can slide that out. And then a couple of options to complete practice. Sometimes in a little bit shorter practice, I love ending with just seated meditation, especially since we've been working deep in the hips to sit cross-legged. Give that another chance to open. If it feels like regular Shavasana laying down would be helpful, right, please feel free to go there. Take whichever variation seems more beneficial for you right now. Wherever you're at, close your eyes. And then, like we've been doing, bring your attention back to your breath. Allow it to be slow and steady. And see now if you can just keep your attention focused on your breath without a lot of effort. Find a little bit of ease. And when thoughts come in here, notice that. Allow it to go by and come back to breath. And I'll leave you here to rest a few more moments, find just a few more moments, or as long as you would like in your meditation or your Shavasana. Thank you so much for practicing. Namaste.